Oh, god damn it. There we go. I just showed you complete wrong thing.
We're gonna go. Fuck.
Yeah. Just
So
the
close
best
and
stuff.
yet so far.
All right. What's up, guys? Welcome back. Join us around the fire. For tonight, we have Mathil on for a talk about designing builds and the current build meta. Thank you for joining us tonight, Mathil. And to start with, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for the people who might not know who you are, and then what it is that you do.
I'm some guy that plays Path of Exile pretty much every day for a certain number of hours, trying to fill the endless void of time with something to do. I put out YouTube videos about builds and typically just pretty much everything I can to do with builds, and I try and clear all content with them, just try and have fun making builds. I do love me some Path of Exile.
All right. Not bad. How are you guys doing? PT, Hatchy?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. Moving along with my character and been farming Breach Lords. Fought Kuyula like 4 times. It's a lot of fun, and I'm getting ready to fight Uber Itzuri. I have 1 Uber Itzuri set and 1 Shaper set. And that's the ultimate goal, is to kill the Shaper with my staff without totems.
Okay.
At this point, I'm just trying to hunt for some pretty good rare rings for my crit detonate dead build, and then do Shaper once I got the gear. That's about it.
And for this week, I wanted to ask chat. Here's a straw poll, and we wanted to know, what kind of player or gamer are you? And these terms were coined from Magic the Gathering, but there's the Timmy, who just plays for fun or the social experience. Like Chris Wilson, he'll play one-handed mace with a shield, a juggernaut, and he just plays
Cyclone.
for fun. Yeah, Cyclone. Then you have your Johnny, who is your self-expressionist. He often plays for a specific theme or synergy. And the third type of gamer is a Spike, where you play to win, you're a meta build enthusiast, and you play only the best possible build. And we may comment on this later, but I think it'll be a lot of fun to see who our viewers are and what they represent.
Yeah, we'll keep
So-
returning to this straw poll every now and then. I'll bring it up. You guys can see some votes, and if PT or Hedgie, if you can just keep spamming it every now and then, so
Yeah.
people can get a chance to vote.
Yeah, so for this week's podcast, we were going to talk about all different kinds of builds, and what better way to talk about builds than have somebody who makes 1 billion builds. Mathil has a lot of experience, and he's tested a lot of different stuff, which I really, really like. But I wanted to go around the table and get your guys' methods, and how do you guys even go about starting a new build? We'll start with lifting.
I think the first thing that I typically do is that, well, back in the day, I would look at a skill, and then I would think, I want to try something fun with this. And then I'll choose an ascendancy class that I feel synergizes great with this, and then you'll start to look up uniques, and then you'll go to the Mikalat PoE site, see if you can run your auras. That's the very basic approach, but I think today, after having played so many builds, the thing that mostly determines what I'm going to try now is if there's some kind of new gimmicky thing coming out, something where you want to try, like the Hands of Wisdom. While it's super meta now, obviously, it's one of those things you look at it and think, hey, maybe this has some potential now, because you don't want to do, your 200 Cyclone build. So that's my general approach. I simply go like that. Skill, gem, ascendancy, then uniques, and so forth. What about you, PT?
For me, when I'm playing solo self-found, I just look through my inventory and I'm like, this is a fun unique. Let's see what I can do with this and push it as far as I can. Mathil?
So you don't care too much if you don't like the skill and you don't want to play the skill or the build, you just do what you have to?
Sometimes the hate is fun.
Okay.
I was playing Detonate Dead right now.
Self-loathing, I like it.
I did
I don't
elemental
know.
hit solo self-found. That was a nightmare.
Yeah, I don't know how you stay sane during that, but hey, to each their own. Yeah, me personally, I guess first things first, I check if it's not a summoner. If it's not, then I'm good to proceed.
Check.
Yep. Beyond that, pretty much what Lifting said. I used to take a certain approach like that. You got to check all the auras and all that, and see the interesting mechanics and uniques, and try and think of an idea around that. But yeah, these days it's a lot more straightforward because you've played so many builds and so many approaches to builds, what's going to work, what defenses you need, what damage levels you need. At this stage, yeah, it's more or less just picking a skill that I want to play with or think I haven't touched on in a while. Think might be fun, or something new I can bring to it that I didn't do before, or just new uniques come out and you try and think of what you can do with them that maybe other people haven't, and just give it a shot to not kind of copy what everyone else has done before as well.
Yeah,
So
that's
can
what
you
you got to do
elaborate?
as a content creator too, right? You kind of want to make some interesting content, and if anyone has done it. I also think there is the whole. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Hedgie. But I also think there's the whole thing about setting a goal. So, for instance, this time people kept saying, lifting, is your Cyclone build as fast as Mathil's Raider Cyclone build? And, it's very hard to explain to people, no, it is not, because this is for Uber Lab farming, for fuck's sake. But that's what makes it interesting sometimes with the new content in the game with Shaper, Uberlab, Maddhatterui, all these types of things. You can decide a build around a certain type of content, and that is something I will do too, because a Shaper killer is not necessarily what you want to play in other settings, right? So, go ahead there, Hedgie. Sorry for interrupting you.
I mean, I was just wondering, what is this distaste for summoners that Mathil has? Like, can you elaborate on that? Like, why don't you like summoners?
Well, I don't know. It's more of a PoE-centric thing, I think, that it started out as. Like, from past games, Diablo 2, Diablo 3, even WoW, having your pets do your bidding hasn't really ever bothered me too much. When I first started out Path of Exile, I did use zombies a bit, like the defensive measures and just, meat shields. And I tried skeletons and, summon skeleton things, and the specters just felt terrible. Overall, it always just never felt good to me in Path of Exile. But in general, I have been more of a sort of kill your own sort of stuff guy. I don't like letting minions do your sort of stuff while you sit back and don't engage as much. Though these days, there is more engagement as a summoner. You got a lot to press and a lot to do. It's still not, the action of you doing the killing and the damage. So it just, I don't know, it just doesn't appeal to me. Something about Path of Exile's zombies and skeleton system just really put me off for some reason.
Do you feel the same way about totems, like a dual totem build?
Yeah, somewhat. Like I could appreciate totems when I was still trying stuff out early on and sort of new to it, and if they were really good, then they were really good. That's fine and all. But at some point, like hitting level 80 or so, I'd just run out of steam to play that build, because it's just me putting a totem down, totem doing damage, moving on, totem. It just, I don't know. It kind of lost its appeal.
I kind of found... Go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna agree. I'm like right in the same boat with Mathil. There's something that's so rewarding when your character is physically the one like pushing the damage and dishing it. And I just don't like sitting there and kind of like waiting for my minions to do my bidding and just watching bosses crumble. But there are a few exceptions with like nulls. Nulls is very, very satisfying. But what were you gonna say, Lifting?
I found that since I've moved to softcore from the years in hardcore, I used to love totem builds. Totem builds were just such a good defense in hardcore, so solid and typically fairly budget friendly for lots of things. But when you start to play softcore, you wanna have it go faster, and you don't necessarily care too much about the defense that the totems contribute. So it's definitely more interesting now in softcore. And I think with the majority of people playing softcore, I think that's one of the reasons that the majority of people also necessarily don't appreciate totems as much, because it's not necessary. But
yeah.
What do you guys find is the single most appealing thing when you're trying to find a build to switch to because you're done one or another? What do you gravitate towards as the most enjoyable?
Most enjoyable. Like, I don't know if it just plays smoothly these days, because you can pretty much play around anything and build any skill into any ascendancy with any type of damage. And these days, yeah, it's mostly just looking for characters and specific skills that play smoothly, like they feel good to use. And, like things, for example, you can build a certain Hand of Wisdom and Action character, and you can go Lightning Strike, which is pretty fucking good, or you can go Spectral Throw, which is infinitely better. So, like, there's just no competition there because I'd like to play Lightning Strike, but it feels terrible to use in the current like environment of the game. Whereas Spectral Throw just feels so smooth and glides over things, kills things very efficiently with its damage, comes back, and fits a certain playstyle. So I just mostly go for things that feel good, and unfortunately, that just excludes a lot of skills to me.
Yeah, I'm pretty methodical with the way like I design a build, and I mean ultimately the first thing I do is I check the goal, like whether it's my currency farmer, my league starter, or a boss killer, and then it's a flip flop between whether it's unique driven or ascendancy driven. Then I usually pick a skill off of its mechanical advantage, preferably something that I haven't played before, and then the big one is I pick a defense type, what I want to, how I want to pair this with a specific defense. And sometimes I'll play a skill that I've already played, but I'll try it with a different defense to see, what I can pull off. And then I'll decide on the uniques and make a skill tree, and then figure out the relative cost. And then I'll weigh the pros and cons based off of the cost. But ultimately, it's going to come down to how much is this build going to cost me. I'm surprised that you guys don't consider cost, well, with the exception of PT, because he can only build based off of what he has, since he plays solo self-found. But how often does cost come into your consideration?
Just before that, are you saying that you play anything else than sweep?
Oh yeah, I mean I've built sweep
So sweep with
multiple different
armor,
ways.
sweep with evasion, sweep with energy shield. No,
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean that's it's my unique that I designed that unique to synergize really well with sweep, and it feels really good. I think you can ask Mathil, and he probably favors sweep over a lot of the other skills that you can use with two-handed staves.
Be careful now, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it does feel pretty good to sweep. I just wish it had, I don't know, I guess a little more area baseline to feel a bit better. But yeah, like I've been playing with the stuff pretty recently, and I've been forcing ground slam, which is good and it's fun. But sweep is probably the other most competitive one if you're going to use something with that stuff. The others, yeah, just feel a little worse given the stuff's nature and what it's got on it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something so rewarding with just like leaping into the middle of the pack and just going to town and killing everything. It's such a quote unquote good feeling.
That actually yeah makes me want to ask, were you pissed off when Earthquake was introduced then? It's just
uh,
like, oh, here's a sweep, but almost better in every way.
Well, the thing with Sweep and Earthquake is you itemize completely differently, where you focus on less attack speed and more on like hitting hard one time. So, they're still different in that regard. Obviously, Sweep with or Earthquake with my current base attack speed would be horrible. I mean, it wouldn't be optimal. And I'd often be throwing down single fissures without getting that really good explosion all the time. And the attack speed helps me move around really fast, so I leap like crazy fast. So I think they're different enough, but there are still some advantages to Earthquake. I just find it a bit rippier with like Fizz Reflect and Reflect in general. That's why
Yeah.
I avoid it. But talking about some of these life builds, and I know Mathil likes a lot of life builds. Let's go around the table and let's just say, what are your standards for life thresholds on a life-based build? Starting with lifting.
Depends on the league, hardcore, softcore. But I'd say in softcore, I think I would be okay getting away with 5,000. In hardcore, I'm trying to get 6 or 7, depending on the type of build.
And
PT.
UPT?
A PT, you're muted.
Yeah,
Sorry
PT's
about
mic
that.
is
Yeah, for myself, I generally find that about 6,000 is going to be more than enough for the general amount of content. But I always make sure that I'm at least nearby another life node so that if I feel that I need it, I can switch it quite easily on my build. As long as I have that, I'm comfortable.
Yeah, and for me, it's something like 6.3k life if I'm like pairing it with armor. If I'm like evasion, then I'm probably going to expect close to 6k. If I'm hybrid, like EB Mom, I'm expecting around 5.8 to 6k. And Mathil, like what do you consider good life?
I mean, everyone's thinking of the 2K Life Rat's Nest meme right there.
No.
I'd say it's pretty good standard, just die to every volatile in the game with 2K life. It's pretty good. But no, it really depends on the character and what you're trying to achieve with it. So there's no like one standard of life that you're supposed to go for. It's always for what you feel comfortable with. So for me specifically, it really does depend on the character, and most of them these days will at least try and hit 5K. But if I'm really trying to push like 90 plus and a few extra maps and levels, then probably 6K plus. But it also depends on, if that character's got any additional defenses and like perma fortifies, for example, good flask uptime, all of that. So it's pretty dependent on the character, I think, but at least 5K. Like it's slowly crept up over the years. I remember I used to be able to get away with like a flat 4K on pretty much all content. And then it's just like got up to 4,500 and then 5K. And now generally you want around 5,500 for all content.
So your typical Shaper killer, how much life are you going to require?
For a typical Shaper killer, like I do want to get a little lazy sometimes, and that means standing in his melee range and copying his melee swings, which usually means you need around 5K life if you're not going for any other defenses as well. So yeah, around 5, probably around 5,200 is what I'd take. So when he melees you, you drop down to like 400 life and then can bounce straight back up, something like that. But depends on the DPS as well. If you got insane DPS that you can like burn through every phase quickly, and you don't even need like any more than 4K life because everything else is avoidable by him.
And regarding defenses, what do you guys enjoy as far as your secondary defense, like Afterlife or Energy Shield? Is there something that you guys usually flock to or usually get when you're building a newer build?
Curse defenses, like curse effectiveness, temp chains and feeble. It's guaranteed enough defense to do everything.
Yeah, I was about to say enfeeble too. Blasphemy enfeeble typically. Just find that to be the most powerful with the least investment required. But if it's any of the traditional ones, then definitely armor. I really don't like evasion in its current state.
Yeah, Have you played a heavy evasion character recently?
No. I think it's for that reason I don't like it. No, I haven't tried one of those where you just super stack it. Just one of those typical ones where you would use evasion as a regular. Have you been playing that yourself, Mathil?
Well, the last one I did that was majorly evasion was Dreamfeather, and that thing was pretty goddamn tanky. It had like 80 or 78% evasion chance, like 46% dodge or something. Almost always Fortify was up. You had some pretty good leech and mobility, and yeah, it was really hard to die to almost anything on that character because things just wouldn't hit you, and then when they would, which was pretty rare, you just you'd have a high enough life pool that you could then bounce back up and recover well enough. And, with all kinds of other defenses from flasks and different chests these days, like a Kintsugi, for example, I think evasion's in not too bad a place.
What you're referring to here is your Dreamfeather build. Have you done an evasion build that isn't Dreamfeather recently?
Since then, not really. I mean, some of my characters are more evasion based, so they're like getting up to about 50% evasion, but they're not too evasion stacked or centered. It is just usually the easiest secondary defense you can get on a character without worrying about secondary defenses. If you're not like trying to stack a defense, you just put on a chest or something, maybe throw on a grace, all of a sudden you've got 50% evasion and you can grab acro. And then that's just like a pretty easy way of getting a decent secondary defense. which at that stage it's not amazing, but it's still good for quite a bit of mitigation. It just won't be the consistency you're looking for.
I think one of the most underestimated things is the Step Night Flask. In any encounter where you're not moving around too much, that thing just instantly makes you 50% more, indirectly more tanky. Super underestimated.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. Like, I feel like I'm the only one that really likes endurance charges. Like, endurance charges definitely with AA, it's definitely one of my favorites, along with attack speed. And I say attack speed because it enables mobility. Mobility is like godly, when it comes to doing
Sweeping.
a lot of sweeping. And I mean, if you get more attack speed, you're naturally going to get to knock back more, and that's going to keep you safe against all the sketchy melee shit, and it's going to reset the mob aggro. And getting attack speed also means more damage, more leech. It's attack speed is just great, and it's one of the offensive skills that provide a lot of defense if you can build around it. Another pairing of defenses, avoidance block. How do you guys feel about block in general?
I find block and evasion to be quite similar. There RNG mitigation, in which case, due to, at least when you're in hardcore, you need to be able to survive the big hits. So if I can efficiently get block through even the nerfed roomies, Alchemist Wheel, Necromancer, sure, investing it onto the tree, it's still quite a hefty investment. So it's difficult for me to justify. Other than that, what you were saying about endurance charges, I feel it depends like what cast when damage taken in Mortal Call you're running. If it's proccing too much, you can't really rely on your endurance charges.
Yeah, I mean, I usually use endurance charges just to keep them for the physical mitigation, and also smooths out the Ellie weak maps and curses that you might get. But probably one of the most strong secondary defenses is leech. Getting like leech wheels, whether it's the duelist global leech or the leech wheel southwest of duelist.
Or just being berserker and going AFK.
Oh yeah, berserker. That's a huge form. How do you guys feel about leech in the current state of the game?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, there are quite a few merits of what you're saying on the duelist wheels, and I do like those, but it's just a shame that so many of those get negated completely by other characters being like CI, Ghost Reaver, Valpact, and then a Victars, and that's like 60 times better leech or something, Yeah. And so it kind of feels bad to invest in that stuff when the alternative is so much stronger. I do like the idea of those duelist leech wheels. They're pretty cool. Like the ones that can give you general leech. That's really nice for a lot of characters. And then being able to scale up your leech rate. But currently it's like just not good enough in the breach league, I think. There's so much breach clusterfucking that you're going to get destroyed, even with like really good leech regen percentage. If you're not killing things like immediately, chances are you get tanked down to almost no health and your leech rate's just not going to bounce back up enough. So Valpact's like pretty much a necessity at that stage, which to me is a bit of a shame.
Slayer Leech is still kind of fun because of that insane protection that you have, but as I kind of agree with Mathil, especially if any of the ones there's some kind of stacking debuff that'll just eat you apart in a second if you can't kill them instantly. And you're rewarded for instant killing everything much more anyways. So
how does Mathil feel about the current state of like Victors?
Victors, I still think it's too strong. I don't really like it. I don't like being forced into using it in some builds because it's just that good. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know what they were really thinking with it, to be honest. Like, we used to have 8% leech on a gem, and a lot of people used to use that for almost all of our builds. You'd slap it in, and that was most of your leech. Then that got nerfed down to 2%, and it became worse, and less people used it. But then there were more leech nodes around the tree, and, in general, you're not going to get more than like 2 to 4% leech on a build. But nowadays, with Victars, that's 20% leech on lightning, and lightning builds, a lot of them are extremely viable, or just even a certain percent of your damage is lightning. Even the conversion flask from Vinctar gives you 20% lightning, which is a huge amount of leech. Then from your Vinctar, it's just too strong. Like, I'm not a fan of seeing people face tank the stuff you're not supposed to face tank in the game.
So everything.
And
Yeah.
well, more or less everything. I mean, there's still going to be a few one-shot mechanics out there that you have to dodge, but yeah, the ones that were designed as sort of one-shot mechanics that you can now circumnavigate. Just that's not how I think the game should be, and just nerfing the Vinctar, for example, or even removing it would fix a lot of that in a lot of builds, I imagine. But then you still have problems like Berserker Leech, I suppose, which just takes up the reins.
Well,
Does
that was
everyone-
one of the. Well, I was going to say that was one of the weird things because they nerfed Leech in 2.0. That was by about 50%, and the reason was they didn't want people to be able to face tank. I think that was basically their direct reasoning. So you would have to move around, and combat would be more fluid. And then in 2.2, and I can't remember when Vinctors came out, they're just like, yeah, here's Vinctor's Instant Leech, 30% Lightning. Then we got Berserker, 100% Leech. And it's just, then we got Slayer Leech, and the new Duelist Wheels, and it's just kind of like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Well, I could accept that maybe they thought that was the wrong direction to take it. But yeah, then it's just like completely went the opposite into too drastic a direction. Because yeah, maybe they thought we don't want it to be too leech centered. They nerfed it and then thought, well, this isn't that much fun for people, and I don't think it's the greatest choice. Maybe we should go the other way.
What do you guys think when they say that Vinctars isn't the problem, but it's Volpact? Obviously, they're talking about the interaction between Leech and Volpact, but what do you guys think? Is that true, Mathil?
Partially, yeah. I mean, every time one of these arguments pops up on Reddit, there will be people saying it's Vinctars. There'll be people saying you're wrong. It's Volpact that's the problem. People saying it's CI that's the problem, or
It's Pathfinder.
Yeah. All manner of things. But yeah, Volpact is definitely still one of the problems, especially on CI builds at the moment, because it's pretty convenient to get for most CI builds, and it's also just like pretty much no downside. So you're just getting it, and it's just pure upgrade for your character and in huge amounts. Whereas for life builds, you're at least sacrificing the ability to regen, which is quite annoying in a lot of sense. So there's at least something like that. But yeah, like with the amount of leech we can get out there, I think Volpact just gives you too much strength, especially when you combo it with 10,000 plus energy shield, making you basically unkillable. So I don't know what you should do about Volpact. Maybe give it 50% leech effectiveness or something.
What about if they just moved it further, like so it wasn't so efficient for CI builds to get?
Yeah, I mean, you could do that too, but then I think a lot of people would still take it because there's more than enough damage to go around with certain skills and builds and trees. It'd just feel worse taking it, and that never feels good.
You mentioned, in regarding uniques and like Vinctors that you hate being forced to use it, and you feel forced because it's just too good to not use, right? So
Yep.
I wanted to pick your guys' brains. Like, do you guys have that same sentiment where uniques or builds that have uniques that are no-brainers, are they unfun to you, or is that a good design?
I think it depends which type, because you get like the weird issue related to Vinctors where reflect, for example, if you don't have the flask or a build that can handle reflect Vinctors, if your elemental is kind of your go-to to finish. But it's kind of a bit of a band-aid solution, and it makes Vinctors a little bit more forced for those builds.
What about you, Lifting?
I feel that if it's a unique that persists over many, many leagues, and like Lightning Coil was at one point, where you just always had to go Lightning Coil if you wanted the best defense, the best mitigation for those types of builds, for the majority of builds, then yes, it's unfun for me. It ruins the creativity, the build diversion, and it makes you feel like you're playing the same thing every time. But I don't think there's anything wrong with a build being, or a unique item being superior for a brief period of time, or a league, or maybe even two. because it just challenges ways people to come up with different ways to then maximize the potential with this. But obviously,
Okay.
yeah.
So going with that, like, what are some of the more interesting uniques to build around? Like, do you guys have any off the top of your head?
Combs aren't.
Calm's Heart, you
Really?
think that's an interesting unique to build around? What?
I mean, that's life. No.
I mean, I
So
wrote
what's-
down I wrote down a couple. I think Skin of the Loyal, that one is interesting because it makes you think. You know, with the colors can't change on it, so you're like, you know, what do I use this with? Another one that's kind of like that, but it's pretty scarce. It's Series Garb. Is another one. It's kind of random with its roles and what you can do with it. Null's Inclination, that one is insanely fun to build around, and I think the Vertex, but you know, it sucks that 3 of them are drop off like one of the hardest bosses in the game. But I mean, having a unique change a build, change the way you play, it's so much more rewarding than use this item because it's the best and everything else is so far inferior. You know, and I totally agree with Mathil. Like, it sucks when you feel forced to use something because it's just a clear-cut choice. And
I think the new Ash Visage, is that the one that gives you kind of CI as long as you hit the right numbers? I think that's an interesting unique. It makes you having to balance around your mana reservation and allows you to go low life, opens up for those possibilities. And it is a budget version for those people who don't or who can't afford the shafts or, you know, want to go Solaris Lorica. So I think that is an interesting unique that does something good to the game. I just don't think there's enough people who have necessarily caught on to the idea of being able to use this item. Obviously because, well, a shafts is superior in almost any way, but it is the budget version that, well, you can probably get going with it. I think that's a cool item.
Mathil, did you have any other uniques that you thought you were really interesting to build around that really changed the way you play?
Nothing I could really think of too much. There's kind of a really good amount of two-hand uniques you can go with these days that kind of just fit each different skill, and it's almost overwhelming. So, like, yeah, with the introduction of Breach especially, there's like another few extra uniques. So yeah, they've just like really upped the amount of, let's just say, two-handers, for example, that you could pick for any different number of things. Like, you know, there's going to be a best in slot for an Earthquake, there's going to be a best in slot for a Cyclone, a best in slot for a Flicker Strike. So yeah, like some of those are really quite just pushing you towards a certain skill. I think it's Katava's axe, that thing. That basically is begging for Flicker Strike. And like, I want to play with it, but then I'd just be making another two-hand character, and it's all kind of more of the same. So yeah, there's a lot of good, interesting uniques there, but they're all kind of pushing you in the same direction, I feel. And one of the other ones I'm not too much of a fan of that keeps seeing a lot of use in my builds is Belly of the Beast, because it really just fills out a lot of life on the right side of the tree, which I don't usually, it's really hard to get. So I keep having to use Belly of the Beast, and it's a choice I'm not really making a lot of the time. It's just something that has to happen to bridge the gap from 5k life to like 6k life. So that's, I guess, an interesting choice that I have to take.
So you're advocating more life on the right side so you don't have to use Belly of the Beast anymore.
I would never. That is just preposterous. Life is fine, especially on that side of the tree.
The one thing that I find that I generally dislike is just a unique that's too generic in purpose. When it fits a build, then it can interest me, or when it gives you a utility that you need to figure out where it's for, that's fun. But just generic stats that goes in pretty much every build that could possibly even use those stats, that's when it's not too interesting for me at all. So like Helm's Heart or Belly or Dying fucking Sun.
Yeah, and I like that mystery. You know, things like some of the uniques that I mentioned, Nulls, Vertex, at Series Garb. You know, the possibilities are endless when you look at these things. The unique doesn't tell you what to do with it. You know, that's what I really enjoy, and it's been a long time since I had that feeling. I guess the newest unique that I've, aside from those, maybe Katava's helmet. That one really made you think, because you're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
This doesn't tell me what to use, and I'm gonna have to use all these support modifiers to modify a skill over this mana cost, and then I can get something powerful. And then what do I want to put in it? It's like a whole project in itself, and I kind of miss that. I kind of miss that feeling. These axes that show up and it says, "Oh, it's going to provide bleed" or something. You're just like, well, okay.
So one of the things that we're going to show off while we continue talking is going to be DR3LL. He actually pushed a Scorched Ray Occultist, did a low life Grand Spectrum. We'll get video started, and that one was going to be for the build of the week. Now, in the future, we'll be presenting that a little bit differently, not quite going over it. There's going to be a link in the chat or a link in the YouTube description if you want to check that out. And the reason was just to see how far you can push Scorched Ray at its limits. And then we were talking about generic stuff, so the Grand Spectrum Jewel was nerfed a little bit. Do any of you guys actually like the Grand Spectrum builds in general?
Well, it's a simple mechanic, but that opens up for something super powerful if you do the investment. And it was fun trying to figure out how powerful this would actually be, but it's just a simple damage boost for the most case, right? And it's too fucking expensive.
I think that with the Grand Spectrum, the interesting part of it is coming up with the skill tree, because it's not going to look like your cookie cutter stuff. You're going to sacrifice a lot of wheels to pick up more jewels. So, there is a challenge there with coming up with the best tree while getting, efficient nodes. But as
really,
far as
I thought that was like the least, because you're like, okay, I need all the jewels, go CI. Congratulations, your build looks like every other single Grand Spectrum jewel.
Well, yeah, they're unique to each other, but
Okay.
I mean, they're similar to each other, but as far as like against the cookie cutter without them, they look very different.
Okay, I see what you were saying. I was just like,
Yeah.
what, Grand Spectrum jewels builds look different from each other? What universe did I enter?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty generic. It doesn't change the way you play, and that's what I like. That's what I like the most, is when uniques do that. They change the way you play, the way you stand, where you move, and what you use for your like flasks and things like that. But I wanted to talk to you guys and get your guys' thoughts on what do you guys consider when you're giving your stamp of approval. What is a successful build?
Mathil.
Does it?
I kind of touched on that earlier about, if it feels good to play, if it feels nice for you to play, if it's smooth. I think that's like the absolute, sort of lowest level baseline for you to have a successful build. You've got to just more or less enjoy it. And it's got to feel good to play. But besides that, for me these days, it's, just clearing pretty much all content. So.
But when you say smooth, like what is that going up against? Are you saying smooth in a rare red tier map, or smooth in dried lake, smooth in yellow maps, mid tier, or smooth?
It is more or less smooth in red tier maps. So it doesn't even have to be amazing in like Shaper or Guardians or Uber Eats series. Just smooth to be able to get to like level 90, to be able to enjoy the playstyle and run a lot of varying map mods, like let's just say enfeeble map mods, and not hate yourself doing it, or temp chains as well. So as long as you're doing the tougher or more sort of oppressing map mods and not absolutely hating your build, I think then for you it should be a success. But yeah, I more or less try and get builds to do everything up to tier 16s, so at least get to tier 16s comfortably enough. If you can then take down at least 2 of the Guardians pretty smoothly, I'd call that a success, because a lot of builds just aren't really situated to be able to do an Uber Series, for example, or some of the immunities from the Guardians. So you can't really force that. It's just, usually your build should be able to take out a couple of Guardians well enough and map pretty comfortably in the red tier maps as well. To me, that's more or less a success.
What about you guys?
I agree with Mathil to the most extent. Yeah, I was playing Sergil's Crank ED the other day, and I made a video talking about how I wasn't satisfied with this. It could kill the Guardians, but it was slow, and then, some of the feedback I got on that video was like, what the fuck, dude? How do you consider a build that can kill the Guardians bad or whatever, right? But it really comes down to that subjective feeling of when do you find the build to be satisfying and living up to your expectations, the ones you've set. And to me, it's important, that they can kill the Guardians, as Mathil says, at the minimum, but also that you can do it without completely struggling while having to do so. I respect that build, and it then works for it. But yeah, I would like to say Shaper Killer too, but I don't know. It's not every build that can kill Shaper.
For me, I'm always looking for something that doesn't completely trivialize the enemy content, so that you can actually fight stuff rather than walk through experience globes. So
yeah,
it can be it can be a little bit challenging trying to find something that isn't too strong but isn't too weak at the same point in time, because it's quite easy when you know more. There's a lot of builds that'll just trivialize everything, but finding something that'll still make boss fights while also not be pulling off your nails, it can be a little bit tricky at times. Detonate Dead was fucking horrible to level, so that was a fun one.
And you leveled it twice, didn't you? You died the first time, didn't you?
Well, we played it as a different one. I leveled this time as differently. I did Detonate Dead leveling a previous league, like 2.1, but that was fucking hilarious.
Yeah, when making a build, I think there are two obvious measures. One is ability to boss kill, whether it means kill Shaper, Breach Lords, or Guardians, or whether or not it can do as many map mods. I think map mods are one of the ways that the game tells us and makes us feel that, oh, this character is very rewarding, because we can just alch any map and there's a 95% chance we don't have to re-roll it. And the more you re-roll stuff and the more you dump currency into these maps, the worse your build feels, right? Because you're just like, man, I'm having to spend so much currency just to run a freaking map. And what are some of the other ways that this game can tell us, hey, your build is good, without map mods telling us that?
I think there's a problem in the community right now, and I think Mathil is to blame here. And I think it has something to do with all the builds he put out, that where you see Mathil killing Shaper in no issue, with no issues and in no time, and then people are like, that is some Path of Exile content I would like to do, so I'm gonna try and attempt and do this. And they may not, exactly get to that point, even though the build might be good, right? But I think a lot of people think that they should be able to kill Shaper with their builds, or they should be able to kill Maddhatterui, or whatever really high content. And that's not always how it is going to be. Not everyone understands if you can get enough currency to do it, or if you have the skills to do it, or something like that. I guess you get these questions all the time, Mathil. Like, I'm doing your build, why can't I kill Shaper, right?
Yeah, well, it is a bit frustrating that any time I make a build, no matter what my personal goal for it is, it's immediately, is this Shaper viable? Is this Maddhatterui viable? And that's even, if I have no intention of going for that with that build, because I know it's going to be a bad, build for those things. It is just frustrating to have to measure up to that stick for every single build, because, I don't know, people want to pick a build. They have limited amount of times, and they want to pick a build, and they want to be able to do everything in the game with it. And it doesn't always come down to that. And as well as that, yeah, you're touching on, like, everything I'm always doing is going to be Shaper viable. It's not, I don't know, it's hard to, like, explain to people, or for people just generally understand that I have put a lot of hours into the game. Like, I do more or less know what the mechanics of the fight are, and I should be able to do it on almost any character. It certainly wasn't that way when I first started Shaper, wasn't that way when I first started Siri, and there's always going to be like a leveling curve for all of us to be able to do that content. So, don't immediately give up if you can't kill it after a attempt or two. Don't always go calling in your favorite streamer to clean up the run for you, and just be willing to accept the loss of a run or two in order to learn the fight.
Do you guys have? I was going to see if you had preferred budgets to run in when you're doing builds.
Yeah, I mean, that's like really huge for me. That's often what I use to dictate whether or not a build is successful is how much does it cost and how much can it do? Like even if it can't kill Shaper or it's not designed to kill Guardians, if it was dirt cheap and extremely powerful to run red maps, I mean that's kind of my standard. It needs to be able to run red maps reasonably well. I don't really care if it can't kill Guardian or it's not optimal for killing Guardians. As long as the price is right and it's very affordable, I'm all about that.
Well, then what's affordable for you?
You know, sub 6 exalts for everything, like gems, links, all the items included. I think that's very reasonable for the amount of time that I play. Anything more than 6 exalts, I consider pretty damn expensive.
I typically view it two ways. I typically in the beginning of a league, I want to create a build that's cheap. Also because of YouTube content and all that stuff. People are looking for something that's budget friendly in the beginning, and I am too, so I can make currency with that. And then eventually I get to a point in the league in softcore, and this is very different from playing hardcore, I feel, where if you just do a lot of content all the time, you actually have a lot of currency all the time. I rarely find that I'm not able to buy an item due to a lack of currency. So even the last time I wanted to create a build, I thought, hey, I'll make another budget video, but I ended up with Apparats, hooves, chevrons, and 500 ES helmet. So you just okay,
you
maybe
failed
this
the
is
budget
not,
build.
this is not going to be a budget build, and for me, a budget build is probably something below 2 exalts. But in the very beginning, people want something that maybe just 20 chaos that can get them going into the content. What about
I wanted
you?
to go back and elaborate real quick. Now that I'm playing softcore, I would say the budget it doesn't really matter that much because I don't start from level 1 with nothing, right? Because I get to keep all the items if I die. So I would say in hardcore, yeah, I definitely aim for something around 6 alts and very, very effective. That's because if I die, I have to rebuild from scratch, and that's a huge setback. And dying with 100 exalt character or even a 20 exalt character, it's pretty taxing, as far as time invested and what I want to do, which is get all 40 challenges. But yeah, go on with what PT was going to say.
I wasn't saying anything. Mathil, what's your budget? Even though whatever you play becomes expensive, so
Make something up.
Yeah, I mean, it sometimes becomes expensive, but I will point out that's because of the few dick bags out there that just start buying immediately and then flipping immediately. It's got nothing to do with like demand or anything like that, and those people know who they are. But they're just, I'm going to use a unique. They instantly buy everything below a certain threshold and then just relist a lot higher, or they'll wait until I make a video and then relist a lot higher. So it is the fault of a few bad people out there, not my fault or anyone else's. But that said, my budget usually just comes down to a few exalts. Like I really don't like using super powerful items that usually correspond to a large price tag because it kind of cheapens the experience. Like it's going to be an amazing item. It's going to do more than what most other items would do, and it then becomes less about you making a nice build and just about you buying good shit and succeeding. So yeah, I usually try and allocate something like 10 to 20 chaos per item slot. Even if I can afford a 1x amulet, I'll usually go for a much more frugal buy in 10 chaos, because chances are from the price point of 10 chaos to 1 exalt, you're only going to gain so many stats, which is almost nothing. You're just paying that much more for the slight closer to perfection. So yeah, anything from 10 to 20 chaos per slot usually does it for me. And that is softcore prices for those that aren't too versed in those, since 1 exalt is about 60 chaos for us.
Yeah,
So
it's
do you
been
ever
dropping
have that
lately. People
you
keep
ever had that
asking what the fuck's going on. Sorry, Henry.
Yeah.
It's all right. Do you ever have that situation where people are like, "Oh, Mathil, what's up, man? I copied your build. I have way better gear than you, but I can't do this. Help."
Yeah, like that sometimes happens. Well, yeah, happens every now and again. Chances are they don't have better gear than me, or they wouldn't have the same sort of stuff that you're supposed to look for. And ultimately, yeah, they just haven't like practiced the fights you're supposed to practice, like I mentioned. They
You
just go
bet.
in, they just try to face tank and they die, and then say, well, why isn't this working for me?
Were you about to say they don't have any skills?
I was not about to say that
No,
actually. I mean, it
you
does
wouldn't
it
say
does
that.
translate to that. Like, skill in this game in particular is just practice at a certain fight and getting better at it, and thus skill. But no one's going to come in and like be amazing at everything, because you have to learn what a boss does and then learn how to avoid it, see when he's going to do it, and yeah, play around it that way. That's like technically what skills are.
I want to
I'm
ask
pretty
you.
sure the skill is one shot the boss so that he can't touch you.
That is an element of
That
skill in some
works.
builds, yes.
I want to ask you, Mathil, what do you consider the hardest shape or Uber series? We had that discussion in my channel the other day.
Which one's harder?
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's really an answer. It depends largely on your build, but it depends on your build, what it can and can't handle, and what the weaknesses and strengths of it. Because, for example, ignite-based builds are pretty shit against most things in Atziri, so it's just going to be so much easier on Shaper. But I think overall it should be Shaper's easier. You can outplay most things he does, I think, for the most part, except for, like the third phase when it starts overwhelming you a bit. Once you've hit a certain DPS level, I think, on your character, then Shaper should pretty much be killable under all circumstances. It's just up to how well you play the last couple of phases. Whereas Uber Atziri, you may still get wrecked no matter what DPS level you're at, because your build just can't do it. And there's certain other things like, spear throw just non-stop might wreck you. So I'd say Uber Atziri is a bit harder.
I definitely find. I think the hardest thing about Shaper, as you mentioned DPS levels, and the problem definitely is if you don't have really good DPS with Shaper, you just find yourself to be overwhelmed by shit near the end.
Yep.
And I guess there is a bit more RNG about the flame blasts and stuff with Uber Atziri, but yeah, I guess I was gonna say that I felt Uber Atziri was easier, but I guess it depends on the build. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think it's just up to the DPS of your build. If you have a certain amount, Shaper is more or less a DPS check because you can go through all the phases pretty quickly. And if you have bad DPS, then it actually requires way more skill to play because you do get overwhelmed and you have to learn to deal with that.
Yeah.
And when we say, oh, go ahead, PT.
I was just going to say, Atziri's also, though, a bit more hectic due to the size of the arena and her significantly smaller health pool, I believe. A build specifically tooled for it can push the phases so quickly that there isn't mechanics. You could technically do the same about the Shaper, but the Shaper is then going to re-teleport you and all that fun stuff. So you've got a little bit more problems that you need to solve with that build.
Yeah, very true.
I was just going to say, the skill that we're talking about, more or less, it usually means moving and dodging. And that's something else that we wanted to discuss is, in relation to the meta, how do we feel about the current state of movement skills? Which are like not competitive and which need a revamp so that they are competitive? Or maybe ones that are too powerful that need some tuning. Chris did mention that we were supposed to get some kind of overhaul, but I wanted to get you guys' opinions on some of the underused ones like Lightning Warp or Flame Dash. How do you guys feel about those?
Lightning Warp is probably the one I used the least, but I think it is something to do with it requiring 3 sockets to be competitive to something like Flame Blast, which just feels better to cast to. Flame Blast is great while leveling, but then eventually you get yourself a dagger or a scepter or something like that. And then you start to whirl the shit out there or shield charge. And I must say though that Leap Slam is probably my favorite. If you have the right weapons
Attack
for
speed.
it, yeah, it's probably the fastest of anything. It's absolutely insane, and it allows you to jump over ledges too. So, Yeah, I don't
I'm a
know.
huge Leap Slam fan.
No surprise there.
Yeah.
What do you use the other skills then, Henji? What do you think of them?
Well, it's interesting that Flame Dash and Flicker are the only two movement skills with a cooldown. And I don't know if other movement skills are going to get the same treatment, but Shield Charge is probably definitely top tier, followed by, some Leaf Slam and Whirling Blades action. Those are probably some runner-ups, but Shield Charge is synergizing with all the other caster builds that are very, very fast. How do you guys feel about Shield Charge?
Yeah, I think, like to answer the entire question, I think Lightning Warp is more or less fine at this stage. It is what a movement skill kind of should be, but there's just absolutely no reason to use it while there is a Shield Charge or a Whirling Blades in game, especially when paired with the fact that you'll put Fortify into those sockets, and then your caster will all of a sudden have Fortify as well as a pretty smooth dashing or movement skill that doesn't take too much, because all you do is get a little bit of attack speed and then it'll feel good enough. Or if you want to go full potato, you can get 400% attack speed and it just becomes a completely different game. And yeah, I think Shield Charge currently is pretty busted. If you stack enough attack speed with it, it's just wrong. I don't like the way that the game is played with that. And yeah, I don't know how you can change it. Like, you can't just innately remove some of its attack speed, because that just nerfs most of us that don't stack it to a huge degree. I maybe just have a certain threshold as to how fast it can go, because I don't know. I think it is a bit too good, especially when you can pair Fortify with it.
It also compounds with Val Haste due to getting the attack speed.
The
And
double,
movement speed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it has less mana requirement than something like Whirling Blades. So even on the mana sustain builds, or the lack of them, it gets better too.
Oh, yes,
I was going to say, I like the idea of movement skills as an escape, or when you're using it more methodically. It's never entertaining to me, personally, when it's just mash your movement skill through packs. That's not quite my thing. I like more reacting with them.
Yeah, and that's. I also forgot to mention that Blink Arrow is another major one that is on a cooldown, and that one fits, with the theme of what PT was saying. It's usually used as an escape or to get up a ledge. And I wanted to pick Mathil's brain on how do you feel about archers in general and their choice in movement skill, and how do you usually build around its mobility in a map?
Yeah, see, I think they're in a really good place. I thoroughly enjoy playing rangers and archers, that sort of stuff, because I like the way Blink Arrow functions. Paired with a decent amount of movement speed. Blink Arrow is just a nice little dodge from action or avoiding some sort of mechanic, and I think that's really quite like similar to what PT was saying. It's, I think, how the game should be played. You run around, you do what you have to survive, and then if you really get in trouble, you use your little escape button and get out of there for a second. And it's got a cooldown and leaves a little clone or whatever. I think that's quite good, and I think that's how it should be played. So I do enjoy playing archers quite a lot, and the only thing I'd like is for wanders to get the same sort of treatment. That's all I can say.
Okay, so what wand movement skill do you want to see then, guys? All of you come up with one right now.
A wand skill?
A wand movement skill.
I want Blink Arrow to function for it, that's all.
You could do...
That'd be a really dumb animation. Just shoots his wand up into the sky.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Well, make it sort of like a lightning warp then. So, you're like summoning the power of fucking thunder or something, and then just boom and go over somewhere else.
You could Wingardium Leviosa yourself up in the air and then just fly around on... No, that's a bad idea. No one.
That kind of works, yeah.
That would have been terrible. But maybe... it's like Lightning Warp, in theory, could be the Wander if it had lower cast speed need, or they did you have Flame Blast, you have Flame Dash, and you have Lightning Warp, which is kind of odd when you think about it. And it seems like both shouldn't be existing. or at least they need to have a more separate purpose, like for builds, I should say, because they function quite differently.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't really figure out like a good way to go about balancing some of these because I mean, two of the movement skills are used in legitimate, main skill builds like Flicker and Shield Charge. Like, you can't just put a cooldown on Shield Charge because then what would happen with the Shield Charge builds? you would just be broken. Facebreaker Shield Charge would be dumpster. So how could they go about making it less appealing? Maybe increase the opportunity cost. I don't know.
Well, they're not beyond doing that because, for starters, Shield Charge wasn't a build until it got revamped and then became pretty freaking amazing. And they were more than willing to dumpster cast on crit in that same sort of manner recently. So it's not beyond them. I'm sure they would be able to put a cooldown on Shield Charge if they thought it was necessary.
Yeah, and it's kind of unfair when some movement skills just work just fine with one socket, right? Like Blink Arrow, you don't really need any additional supports on that. That's a good solid one link.
It's because
Whereas some of the
sucks.
other ones, it feels mandatory.
So-
right? You think Blink Arrow sucks? I think
Nah,
it's
I
quite
mean,
good.
sure, but comparatively, right? That's the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And it kind of sucks that archers only have Blink Arrow, really. Lightning Orb's too slow. Flame Dash is probably going to want faster cast on it to have it, reliable.
Yeah.
You might get caught in a stun or something with shit cast speed.
I think that's definitely an important thing you brought up is the disparity of the links. Because if you need 4 links to make it work because you're trying to use Lightning Warp and you need... it's painful. Whereas your Blink Arrow, you got one. A proper attack speed build can even get away with a Whirling Blades without being linked if it's got Val Haste. It could, yeah. It kind of needs to be a little bit more level. Made sense before when we didn't have as much gem saturation, but now that we do, anything that requires a bunch of gems, it's not really an option.
No,
guys
it's true because
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say with the Whirling Blades, Leap Slam, and Shield Charge, yeah, like the more links you put into it, kind of the better it becomes and the better it feels because faster attacks is the only one that really increases its like sort of speed as comparative to Lightning Warp. But then you attach Fortify and all of a sudden you have a huge defensive boost. Then you attach Blood Magic and all of a sudden it costs 0 mana. Whereas with Lightning Warp, for example, you're just making it faster and faster while attaching no additional utility or reducing its mana cost. So it's just kind of unfair or unbalanced in that scenario, I think.
Unless you want to use it as a damage dealing skill. Because
And
a lot of
you
people
don't.
do that.
Well, one thing you can't do with Shield Charge is you can't have cast when damage taken Shield Charge, where you can Lightning Warp and Flame Dash. And clearly, that
That is
difference...
something you want to do. 'Cause,
Exactly. That is utility that you're paying for.
You guys remember when the original Flame Dash, when it came out, how sick that was? It had that no limitation on its range, and you could just go 3 screens away. It was absolutely insane, and people were so frustrated when they nerfed it. But I mean,
That was also before Fortify, right? Wasn't it?
yeah,
The Flame Dash?
guess it was.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
like
with-
Leap used to have a huge range.
yeah, it
Yeah.
did. It got
Yeah, Leap
nerfed
Slam. Yeah.
big
Yeah.
time.
But Leap Slam is one of those skills where you, right now, unless you really have that sick weapon with or dual wield those weapons for really insane attack speed, it just doesn't feel good. But if you really try to invest into it, like the Uber Lab runners are doing, it's so insanely fast. But it just, on average, your expectation from Leap Slam doesn't feel that good.
You know, technically speaking, Smoke Mine is a movement skill, and the last that actually used to be like one of the #1 used skills back in Ambush, because the boxes were so damn rippy that smoke mining was like one of the best ways to do it. And I think that was the time you couldn't have a immune to freeze flask. But it's such a shame to see, such like unique movement skills just not being used at all anymore. And
I just made me think of how often everybody, like every fucking 30 minutes you'd hear like, can we get phase run back? Can we get phase run back? Can we get phase run back? So GGG's plan, give us a shit skill that has nothing to do with phase run that's so terrible nobody will use it and thus never ask.
Yeah, it's
Pretty brilliant,
It's that way. They're like, here.
It's so terrible. I look at it, I'm like, okay, there's got to be a way to use this thing. And
I use it
probably
right now,
spent
actually.
What are you using it for?
I'm using it on the Aberrath Soups build. So it's kind of nice for that. You can run through stuff. But yeah, I think it's the only reason I would ever go with it. Cast when damage taking face run, that's used too. But yeah.
As long as it does, it's applied in one build, I guess that's okay.
I think it definitely didn't live up to what people had hoped for. I kept telling people that, look at how the skill is mechanically. This is not going to live up to what you want in with this clear speed meta right now. It was really good back then, or the idea, or it was different back then too, but still, yeah.
One of the things going forward, things that I would like to see as far as like the meta goes, is the flavor and the elements. And I had some really big concerns with, the original element getting converted or changed into something so unrecognizable, especially with freeze and chill. I feel like skills or the elements are poorly designed when your best course of action is to convert it and have it do something else. How do you guys feel about the state of, fire, cold, and lightning, or fire, cold, and lightning? Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty bad right now. Well, not right now, but has been for a while, I'd say. Like, one of the only reasons to go lightning right now is because of how overpowered some of the items are, like Hand of Wisdom and Action. Otherwise, what are you doing with lightning that you can't do with everything else? Nothing, really. It's just some of the uniques are really good for it. Cold doesn't really exist at the moment. And it baffles me why they keep throwing chill and freeze immunity on absolutely everything. Like to just really drive home the point that you're not supposed to play this skill in the end game, or convert it now, or you will suck.
Well, they have to put the cold and chill immunity, because if they didn't, lightning would be too good with Call of the Brotherhood Ring.
I mean, yeah, then it would have that problem too. At least not chill immunity for some things. I mean, come on, is that really overpowered to have a bit of chill? I don't know.
Even in the current state of the game, for cold, like for chill and freeze to really shine, they would need to ramp up the difficulty. But it just so happens that the hardest shit in this game is chill and freeze immune. So it's like, what the fuck are you useful for then? You can't win. You're just gonna suck as a cult caster.
But
more
temp
often
chains
than
is fine. Chill, no. Temp chains, don't see a problem there.
Yeah, and things like Call of the Brotherhood, what Mathil was saying, it's so good. It often does Cold's job better than the original Cold skill. And fire can convert into poison and do astronomical amounts of damage through poison. And when are we going to actually see like the original skill without conversion do really, really well?
Never.
But I think that may just as much have something to do with the current lightning skills available at the moment, or the cold skills available at the moment. Obviously,
somewhat.
Yeah. I mean,
you're going to have a bit of a difficulty, because cold spells were designed so that, if you could freeze things, that would be good. Therefore, cold had to have a lower top end. Makes sense. It would have a higher average, lower top end. But then if you give lightning the ability to convert to cold, the reason they gave cold a downside, lightning has very high top end. So now lightning does everything cold does better. Okay, and then the same thing because of how fire works, and giving us act like fire doesn't need to chill, but it can with Arctic Armor or Cast when damage taken Vortex. Fire doesn't want to do the other elemental types, it just wants to burn. And they add in stuff like, Val Lightning Trap, Cast when damage taken, Vortex, Elementalist, and it's just kind of like, hey, I get everything. Cool. Nice disadvantages to my flame blast.
Yeah, that's kind
I
of
think that is the problem. There's just the niches have been taken away
Yeah.
from those elements and skills.
it's a little disconnected from what the original idea was when they probably made those status elements, right?
Yeah, and just to give the newer viewers an idea of like the current state of just the overall skill design or the element design, cold damage usually has the most narrow X to Y damage, meaning the difference between the high and the low end is very, very small. Lightning has the biggest disparity. It's got the really low lows and the really high highs, and fire is
Broken.
between lightning and cold.
If
But
you ignore
cold
flame
skills,
blast.
cold skills cost the most, resource wise. That's in my eyes, they need to be the cheapest. And they also have a conditional support gem called hypothermia, which means you can do more damage on the second hit as long as the mob is chilled. But when it's chill immune, that support gem is utterly useless. So
Cold
I mean,
is, however, the most satisfying of the elements to play. There's nothing better than a good shattering. I'm playing Volspark right now with Call of the Brotherhood, and
I think
sounds from that. So
yeah, but you're referring to cold damage, not cold skills, right?
yeah. Just the shatter
it's a big
effect.
difference.
It doesn't matter what
Yeah,
skill,
big
just the
difference.
effect.
I don't know. I think unfortunately, like Elementalist Prolif feels more satisfying nowadays. To be able to, burn everything on your screen and it's all these like red circles and like purplish hues all over the place. I think that's actually cooler and more effective.
Herald of Ice can carry. That's a good cold skill, Herald of Ice, but that's only with on-kill effects.
It's so
And they've recently, put in some uniques to try to push cold casting, the Halcyon whatever neck, and then the unset or the rings that add one additional cold projectile or one projectile on a cold skill, but those are not the ways to fix cold, cold skills. It's a band-aid and it's not going to fix the problem.
Do you want mobs to just not be immune to cold damage
Or some kind
cold
of, like-
effects, or do you want more effects to cold damage?
Maybe some like cold effect penetration. You know that wheel in the Witch northeast of the start, next to Fire and Lightning. Maybe have something over there that penetrates to you through immunity, or something. Because you need some consistency. You need to be able to chill. Because if you can't chill, you can't use hypothermia, and you can't do a lot of things. And it's just like you're playing something that costs more on your mana or life and does less damage. It's like, it's unfair. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
Well, I'm just wondering if they changed it so that rather than chill immunity, they would have 100% chill reduction, and then every little bit of your chill reduction would get reduced from their stat from 100%. That could be a really convoluted way of doing it. I don't think it would be fun, though.
Maybe
probably still not investing right now into anything like that because Ignite just wins. So
Yeah.
you're still gonna just go towards whatever gets you the infinitely faster result. So like the best defense is a good offense right now. So why not just go towards Ignite regardless of whether you can chill?
And what is the best cold skill right now? It's what, Vortex?
It's Vortex.
Yeah, and its best form is to convert it, right?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah, for
so
fire
it's-
damage, because it gets fire damage that scales up spell damage, so woot.
And then you have the other skills. You have Freeze Pulse, which gets, blocked by edges on doorways and a bunch of other stuff. And then you have Arctic Breath that costs a ton to cast or put on a totem. And then
You
you
have Glacial
have
Cascade that you need a Helm enchant to make it a pure cold skill.
yeah.
It's pretty solid by itself, though. It's a decent skill.
Cold Snap, the
It's Cold
AoE
Snap
is
too, yeah.
it's laughable. It doesn't even compete. It's so sad that cold skills get no love. They only get hurt every patch.
Yeah, Cold Snap kind of feels like one of those skills that, used to be pretty good, but now with the changes and a more modern game, it just maybe got left behind a bit.
Well, even then,
Yeah.
it just freeze isn't an advantage. Like, they had to nerf freeze mine at one point because that was too broken, and nobody would give a shit about that capacity now. Like, why are you stopping a mob? Why aren't you just kill it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and then for the other attacks, we have Ice Shot, Frost Blades, Glacial Hammer. All these things I'm listing off are all super underwhelming. You can use them. You can use them and do some things, but why do those things when there's something that's much, much better and can freeze better than you? It's,
Yeah.
But PT, did you want to go over some announcements that we have?
Well, before we could go over that, just a quick thing. What do you guys feel about the league, apparently, between 2.5 and 3.0?
I mean, do we know anything
Let us know
about
about the...
We don't. Well,
the
just
info.
the introduction that there is going to be one.
Did they talk about the duration of the league?
No.
So
They said
the
they
only thing
originally
we do
wanted
know is that there will be a league.
Yes.
Well, I guess it makes sense because they want to run a beta before the new expansion. It also goes to say something about when we can expect the expansion to come out, or at least it will probably be a bit later. But I think the interesting thing is going to be when we get to know how long this league will be, because then maybe they will overlap it with the beta at the same time.
It would make sense if they did that, because
Yeah.
one of the annoying things about the beta was there wasn't normal content
Yeah.
going on at the same time, so that would make sense if not hilariously split people's attention.
I'd
Yeah.
like to see like it be a good flashback, incorporating pretty much everything that we currently have up to Breach. The flashback leagues are always insanely fun, and yeah, a good month of that with most of the mods being up most of the time. I think people would really enjoy. Loot
What
would
if
be
it's-
completely overwhelming though.
If it was 3 months, or if it had to be 3 months, you still would want a flashback league?
Well, 3 months, I doubt you could put a flashback league in. I'm sure they'd have to come up with something for that. A 1 month would be good, sure, but
I think people would be incredibly frustrated with flashback for 1 month. I mean, I think just for 1 weekend, it's so fucking annoying. But yeah, it's fun. But for 1 month, I don't think they're gonna do it for 1 month.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be longer than a month.
Yeah.
I mean, it just kind of makes sense with the holiday season. How are you going to have your biggest production, your expansion, and have more than half of the people out of the office for a month, for vacation and time off?
Well, we got Dark Shrines when they were trying to do something quick, and Dark Shrines was a lot of fun to me.
Yeah,
So
Dark
if we
Shrines
get-
was amazing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
All right,
That was
is
designed
there-
by Chris too, right?
I don't remember, actually. So is there anything else you want to bring up or mention, Mathil, or advertise yourself before we close this off?
I'm sure everyone knows by now. Mathilification on YouTube. I put up a video every couple of days about whatever I'm doing. Maybe more real life stuff in the future. Otherwise, yeah, my stream's on 6 hours a day, pretty much every day, trying to make skills work that you probably shouldn't. And yeah, still just enjoying some Path of Exile. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us, man.
Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate that.
Anything else
course.
you want to... I was just going to say, anything else lifting or hedgy that you want to quickly mention?
Nope. I'm good.
Nope.
Oh,
All right. So thank you guys for joining the Lioneye Watch podcast. Now, one of the things we are changing is rather than a weekly podcast, we'll be shifting to bi-weekly with a few more guests here and there. So you can look forward to that. For those who didn't manage to catch the start, it'll be posted on Hegemony's YouTube channel. And those watching on the YouTube can catch it live. It'll be, well, just check the description, figure it out yourself. You're a big boy. Well done, you. So all the descriptions for PvP events on Saturdays, the podcast, anything that's been advertised. Thank you very much, DR3LL, for his build of the week. That was the Low Life Grand Spectrum. And then Suit Too Small for the lab run of the week. So if you want
Suit
to
size
post
small.
your suit
He meant-
size small, my apologies.
He meant bi-monthly, not bi-weekly. Sorry.
Well, isn't bi-weekly actually mean both? Or screw it. Screw it bi-monthly. Once every 2 weeks. We'll figure that out.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Have fun.
Take care.
See you guys later.
Bye.